This is For Keeps, a podcast about collections and connections. I'm David Peterkowski. The famed Hungarian inventor and puzzle maker Erno Rubik, the man who gave us the beguiling Rubik's Cube and many other mechanical puzzles, once said, "If you are curious, you'll find the puzzles around you. If you are determined, you will solve them." With Rubik's quote in mind, you're about to meet two people who've shown quite a bit of curiosity and determination when it comes to puzzles. And now, they've got a grand European home in which to showcase and share their immense collection. Roxanne and George Miller have both been entranced by puzzles since their respective childhoods. First separately, and then together as a married couple, they've been collecting puzzles for decades, such as jigsaw puzzles, including the oldest one in the world, edge-matching puzzles, in which the edges of pieces must match up with the ones around them, and manipulative puzzles. Picture the Rubik's Cube, or any puzzle featuring interlocking pieces that need to be put together just so. The Millers' puzzles come from around the world, and the subsets within their vast puzzle collection are pretty much too numerous to name, though some highlights include burr puzzles. Those are three-dimensional puzzles often made from interlocking wood pieces. 3D crystal puzzles, which are made from clear or translucent materials. And beautifully intricate sculpture puzzles that are made from bronze or other materials and double as pieces of art. In all, Roxanne and George's collection now consists of more than 80,000 puzzles. For years, the couple displayed much of their collection in their home. Actually, two homes, in Boca Raton, Florida. And they frequently hosted fellow enthusiasts and their share of puzzle-themed gatherings there. But recently, Roxanne, a retired teacher, and George, who used to build foreign exchange systems for Bank of America, shook things up by moving to Italy, where they've bought a home in the medieval Umbrian hill town of Panicale. But it's not just any home. The Millers' new place dates back to 1419, and it's actually a castle. And much of the property they're settling into once served as a hotel. When I recently spoke with the Millers, George and Roxanne were deep in the process of getting their castle in order, while waiting for much of their puzzle collection to arrive from the States. George even gave me a quick tour on Zoom.
If we ever get like 16 monks who want to eat, they can serve them here. We found a spot for this magnificent puzzle there. Can you see him up there?
Oh, yeah. In our conversation, Roxanne and George patiently educated me, a puzzle layperson, on all things related to their puzzle collection, including their collecting philosophy of display and play, how their puzzles inspire a surprising amount of research, and even how their collection features a one-of-a-kind, revealing life-size puzzle that was modeled after themselves. More on that later. Roxanne's origin story as a puzzle enthusiast and collector began in childhood, with a deal offered to her by a relative.
I was about 6 years old, and I was at a 4th of July party at my grandparents' house, and I wanted to play badminton with my grandfather. He told me he would play with me when I solved a puzzle, and he handed me a Gilbert disentanglement puzzle. They came in sets of 12, I believe, at that time. I think that's what he had. And I went away. A couple minutes later, I came back and I had it in 2 pieces. And he handed me all of them. And then he told me, you have to put them back together or they're not solved. So I brought them back over, solved, put back together. And he still didn't play badminton with me. But that was my introduction to puzzles.
And it's a very vivid memory, clearly. Still.
Oh, very much so. Yes.
George also was captivated by puzzles at an early age. In his case, puzzles that came from the other side of the world.
I don't know what year it was, but I was about 10 years old, and I got a little wooden barrel from Japan, and I could take it apart, and then I could put it together, And I was very proud of myself, and I started taking other things apart. I took an alarm clock apart, and I didn't know they had the spring mechanism, and the whole thing sort of exploded in my face. And this one I learned at a very early age that there's some things you can take apart, but you can't put back together.
Young George's second Japanese puzzle was a burr puzzle, with those aforementioned interlocking sticks. While manipulating the sticks into the puzzle's various solutions, George discovered that there were actually more solutions possible than the manufacturer realized.
There was like 12 pieces, and you could take subsets of 6 of them. And there was 4 different puzzles you can use with the 4 different subsets. And I solved them all, and I figured out, hey, there's some other subsets that they didn't mention that can be solved too.
Oh my goodness. So you actually figured out there were more ways to solve the thing than the manufacturers.
Yeah, and I wrote them a letter, and I said, you can go from 6 to 8 and markedly improve your product, but I never heard from them, and I figured they couldn't read English. And
and who's going to listen to an 8-year-old child?
And maybe you embarrassed them a little bit. Who knows? Eventually, both Roxanne and George began collecting in earnest, George finding particular inspiration after viewing the collection of Edward Hordern, a noted British collector who was renowned for his puzzle-solving abilities. So how soon did each of you begin collecting? Did you collect as kids?
Oh, yes. When the Rubik's Cube first came out, my mother really didn't like toys. So she gave me a Rubik's Cube. If I could solve it, I could have another one. And I did learn how to solve it. But initially, I learned how to solve it using the screwdriver technique. And then eventually I did learn as years went by, but I got every single one that came out. And at that time, you could get puzzles through the snail mail. And I found Meffert's puzzles in a catalog, and I wrote off, and I started buying puzzles from Hong Kong, of all places. I think I was 13 years old when I first started collecting. And I still have those puzzles in our collection. That's great. George, same question. How about you?
Well, I was always making puzzles on my own for my own pleasure. And I was a big fan of Martin Gardner, and he would often mention puzzles in his column. And I would make them in my garage. And I found out there were other people that liked puzzles, puzzle people. And so I joined this organization, the IPP, the International Puzzle Party. And I had the good fortune to visit Hordern and see his collection. And it was most amazing collection I'd ever seen. And it was vast, and it was complete in every respect. And I thought to myself, I could never collect these because most of them were antiques and one-offs, and you can't buy them. They no longer exist.
To get around that slight problem, George tapped into his innate mechanical sensibilities and came up with a scheme.
I had a workshop, and I like to make puzzles, so I became what is known as a puzzle prototyper. My MO was to canvas the world for puzzle ideas, and if someone had a puzzle idea, they could sketch it out, and I would send them a mechanical version, and I wouldn't charge any money. And actually, I'd make 2. One I'd send to them, and one I went into my collection. So if I couldn't have the world's largest collection, I would have, from this point on, a lock on all the new puzzles that were coming out. And this was, again, before computers were very popular. And so the pace of invention was a lot less than it is now. And so I at one point, I had over 100 people that would be sending me designs of theirs, and I would build it. And very often I'd improve upon them, at least in my mind, they were improvements. In the early days of computers, there was a big sense of propriety, and people would want to patent their ideas. Well, patenting a puzzle turns out to be expensive for many reasons, and unnecessary, because puzzles have a very short shelf life in the marketplace. And so now there seems to be more of a tendency towards collaboration on puzzles. I'm encouraging this as well.
So in your collection, were there certain kinds of puzzles that you enjoyed at first and gravitated towards?
Oh, yes. The burr puzzles I enjoy. And Roxanne seems to gravitate more towards the edge matching puzzles. Can you describe those for lay people who might not know what they are? Yes, I can. The burr puzzle is usually a set of sticks, most commonly 6 sticks that have notches in them. And you put them together in very clever ways such that all the notches are hidden and all you see is the sticks in a nice pattern all coming out from a center interlocking. And usually it's made out of various types of wood. And the upper end of the scale would be using very exotic woods from the Philippines and from South America and polished to a high sheen and more of a work of art than an actual puzzle. And the edge matching, it's usually 2-dimensional. And if you could imagine 9 squares with horses on them, but the horse has the head on one square and the legs on the other square in various fashions. And you have to move the squares around so that they can make a 3x3 square of squares where there's no disjoint horses. They're all connected with their legs, that sort of thing. And there's a lot of variations on that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and those 2 fields are just a very tiny part of all the genres of puzzles. That's one of the things that we're building here in Italy, is a place where we can open our collection to other interested people who can come and enjoy all the different genres and actually do research if they're interested in various mechanical movements and mathematical combinations.
One combination that springs to mind when you ask the Millers about their puzzle collection is a very special disentanglement puzzle that they had commissioned, and for which they modeled. Maybe we can dive into your collection a bit. Off the top of your head, what would you say are some of the standout items?
Well, there's one stand-up item called The Lovers. Are you aware of that one?
That's one of my questions, is about The Lovers, yes.
Have you seen that yet?
I saw pictures of it on Roxanne's blog, so...
Yeah, okay. There was a puzzler, Wally Lee. He's now in a very sad state, but he was once a very interesting puzzle collector and a magician. Those 2 things sort of go hand in hand. And we're having a party at his place, and then I wandered in the backyard, and there was these PVC pipes that were all glued together in a strange way, and there was a rope around them. And I managed to get the rope off and then put it back on again. That's what you do with disentanglement puzzles. But I was very intrigued with it and wanted to have a version of it for myself. And what we decided to do is we could have the same problem, but in a different shape. Instead of PVC pipes, we had statues of ourselves made in full life-size proportions and in such a topological fashion that we had a belt around the 2 of us that to disentangle, you'd have to take it off. And we decided to put a little spice in it by having this as a
piece of art.
Yeah, but we're both nude in this one. And so some people just go and take that right off, and other people are afraid to touch it. They're kind of...
a little bit prudish.
But that one weighs about 400 pounds, and it's about 5.5 feet tall. And I'd have to say that's one of the outstanding pieces. There's not a whole lot of them out there in the world. Actually, it's the only one.
This is the only one. Nobody else is crazy enough to do something like that.
I think it's funny that some people go right toward it and some sort of maybe avert their eyes or just to sort of avoid it.
Oh, yeah.
We've had friends that won't go anywhere near it, but people who are new and they don't know us very well, they'll go over and try and take it off, and they see it as a piece of art, and then they, oh, that's you, and some of them run away, and others just finish solving the puzzle. So,
and they get to learn something about you guys.
Absolutely.
So I think I read online that you have the world's oldest jigsaw puzzle, and I think it dates back to the 1760s or something like that. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it's called the Spilsbury jigsaw. And the origin of it was for wealthy Brits to give to their children so they would know how to rule the world and the territories that they were going to rule over in the future. And we do have the most complete copy of it. Because we have that one, I also purchased the first American-made jigsaw, which is from the early 1800s, late 1700s, early 1800s. I don't recall accurately. And it was missing the state of Illinois. But I saw on eBay, someone was selling the state of Illinois for $1.50. It's the best land grab ever, even better than the Louisiana Purchase. Yeah. But that was it was a puzzle. The U.S. one was a puzzle acquired through an antique auction. Yeah, a maps auction.
So these are changing hands through auctions, typically, these really rare pieces.
Yes.
When the subject of their vast puzzle collection comes up with non-puzzle people, Roxanne says it can be challenging to get across the depth and breadth of what it is they've collected. So if and when you talk to a layperson about the puzzles you have, do you talk about the categories that they sort of fall into in sort of general ways, or is that even possible, or is it such a wide range that you can't even qualify or quantify them?
Most people don't ask about that. In fact, when we start talking to people about puzzles, they say, "Oh, you collect jigsaws." And I said, "No, yes, we have some, but no, we don't. Think we collect mechanical puzzles." And again, they don't understand. So we say, "Well, think about the Rubik's Cube. Have you seen that?" And then everyone goes, okay. And then they start talking to George about how smart he is because he can solve one. And, what do you think, Roxanne, about George playing with these cubes all the time? And it's like, wait a minute, I'm the puzzler on this side, not, so it's an interesting, but everybody understands Rubik's Cubes, but we always have to go to jigsaws first. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then people really aren't interested after that.
Jigsaw puzzles were a relatively small part of the collection of the late aforementioned Edward Hordern, a roughly 40,000-piece collection the Millers actually purchased from fellow collector James Dalgetty in 2020.
We acquired maybe 100 jigsaws from him. I think I've purchased maybe 20, 25 over the years. We don't anymore, but we still have it, but we had the largest jigsaw puzzle produced, which was 42,000 pieces. I had started on it pre-pandemic. We bought the Hordern Dalgetty collection. The jigsaw got put back into the box, and maybe one of these years I'll find time to put it back together again. Since then, they've come out with bigger ones, but at the time, it was a whimsical purchase on a cruise to Spain. We seem to do that when we go on cruises, buy things spontaneously. I've got some jigsaws mostly from the States because the collection that we acquired is very Eurocentric. So I've been looking at picking up items from the States to round it out.
And then there's the story of how Roxanne and George met, which took place, where else? At an international puzzle party. And was it a shared love of puzzles that brought you two together? I'm guessing that had something to do with it?
I blame it on the wild turkey, but yeah. Our friend Oscar that George spoke of earlier was visiting China before an IPP. George and I were both in IPP together, and he photobombed me one night. That's how my first recollection of him. Anyway, we were at an IPP. I was supposed to take Oscar and George on a tour of factories in China, and Oscar got sick, so I took George on the tour, and everything was fine. 3 years later, he came over with Oscar again to a puzzle party in China, and everyone was paying attention to Oscar, and poor George was left alone, so I went over and talked to him. We've been together ever since. Yeah.
Roxanne and George don't just share a life and a puzzle collection together. They also share a philosophy about how best to celebrate and share the power of the puzzles they've collected. It's a philosophy that came in handy when the Millers received a unique, spherical puzzle from the noted collector and puzzle designer George Hart.
Our philosophy is display and play. So everything that we have everything that we own when it comes here will be on display. When we had it in Florida, everything was on display. Nothing is hidden in boxes. And, we give people a Post-it note when they come to visit. Go play with what you want to. Put the Post-it note down. Make sure the puzzle goes back to where it came from.
And people come to visit, usually in groups. And one particularly sharing moment in our lives was we got, at my request, George Hart sent a puzzle called People to our museum, gratis, but it came in 60 different pieces, all identical. And you had to put them together with little screws in a sphere. And we had a group of about 10 of us putting this thing together collectively. I had put it's large. It's about an 8-foot diameter sphere. And so I had a rope coming down from the ceiling that we hung this on. And we had to do several attempts at it because we made some false moves putting it together. And one particularly brilliant gal wound up doing it all by herself, and the rest of us drinking beer, cheering her on.
Have you ever seen the movie Field of Dreams?
Oh, yeah.
There's that line in there, build it and they will come. Well, that's pretty much what happened in Florida. We put together the Puzzle Museum. We put it out to the puzzle community that we were open for business, as it were. And everyone was welcome to come and puzzle with us. And we had a constant stream of visitors. It also helps that we have extra bedrooms, so you don't have to stay in a hotel. You can stay with us. But that's the way we've set it up. And so I guess that's how we share. We don't send puzzles out. I've had bad experiences with that in the past, but everyone's welcome to come in and play.
And to that point, we have renamed the Puzzle Palace as the World Puzzle Center, because that more accurately describes our dream, to have people come here in the center of Europe, which arguably is the center of the world, and enjoy a collection from all over the world. And there's not that many very serious puzzle collectors. They number probably less than 1,000 worldwide. And there's far more people interested in Barbie dolls than puzzles. So it's an intimate community, and people are respectful of one another and their ideas. It's a pleasant intellectual community.
I bet. And you found your tribe, as they say.
Absolutely.
So can you talk a bit about the castle where you're now living and how you found it and how the collection will likely be displayed there?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So we were on an around the world cruise at the end of COVID. It was just as COVID was finishing. When we hit Europe, for us, I came of age in Europe. We've both traveled here extensively. We decided instead of going on tours with the cruise, we would visit our friends. And we were in Civitavecchia. We had no friends in Rome at the time, so we decided we'd do a ship's tour. We went to an Etruscan necropolis, and part of that tour was visiting a museum of sarcophagi. And that's about as boring as you can get. Once you've seen one or two, you've seen them all, right? But what was interesting was that it was in a castle. And George pointed out the amount of space and he could see how you could display puzzles in the castle. And he said, if we had this castle, we'd never run out of room. We had enough of the tour. And I said, as we were walking out, I said, I want a castle. So we went out and we had a cup of coffee. And while he was playing a bridge on his telephone, I Googled castles for sale in Italy. And that's the honest to God truth. So we went back to the ship. I got a massage. George poo-pooed it. He said, castle is stupid. It's a dumb idea. When I came back, he said, I've got a castle I'd like to show you. And it was exactly the same castle I showed him. As it turned out, that was this castle. So the next morning at 7 a.m., when the ship docked in Livorno, we got off the ship. We hired a taxi driver for the day, not knowing whether we could see the castle or not. We drove 3 hours. I got on the telephone making calls to realtors. And the one that got lucky sold us the building. She answered the telephone and managed to get us in here to see it. We were in the town for an hour and a half. We toured the castle, we bought the castle, and we had lunch. We got back in the taxi and we drove back to the port, and we made it just in time as the ship was leaving. It's a very whimsical purchase.
Yeah, I was going to say, some people, they'll just go to a gift shop and get, like a snow globe or something. You got a castle.
Yeah, we bought a castle.
But not just any castle. It's a safe bet that the Miller's new home is probably bigger than yours.
It turns out that we have about 95 rooms. Give you an idea of the size of this place.
Well, that's between two buildings.
Yeah. We kind of bought the building next to the castle. At one time, this was all connected. The way it worked in the early 15th century was that people were killing other people all over the world.
Just unlike today.
Yeah, unlike today. And to protect themselves, they'd find a hill or a mountain, and they would build a fortification. Usually that would encircle the top of the mountain and try and collect all the water and the grain they possibly could and hold out for sieges. And they would build these walls. So walls here in this castle go between 3 and 13 feet thick.
To finish up, follow up on the question, George has purchased something like 3 miles worth of shelves that will be installed throughout the castle. It used to be a hotel, so we're going to call it the hotel, but we bought the 2 pieces are one building now. But the shelves will be installed between these 2 buildings. And we've got room to grow because we have 95 rooms, minus 20 for the bathrooms and the kitchen. We're down to about 75 rooms that we can display puzzles in. And each room will have a puzzle theme. So there'll be a Rubik's Cube room. We've got a room full of mirrors for the crystal puzzles. The room we're sitting in here is for the IPP puzzles. And it goes on and on and on.
So it will be thematic in how it's laid out.
Yes, that's the way my brain works. So that's the way it's going to be. Yeah. I'm sure other people have different ideas. And I've heard from a lot of people I'm doing it all wrong. But, it's my puzzle collection and it's my castle and I'm going to do it my way.
That's how it works. So you mentioned crystal puzzles. Can you talk about what those look like? I don't know that I'm familiar with them.
They are effectively, it's a 3-dimensional jigsaw made out of clear acrylic. And
like in the shape of Mickey Mouse.
Yeah, they're often cartoon characters. I've got the Eiffel Tower, a lot of different cars, different companies. I've got the Merlion from Singapore. The government decided they wanted one. And they're anywhere between an inch tall and 15 inches tall. Very lightweight, just plastic.
And so one of the things we found when we moved to Italy was mirrors are very cheap. They kind of invented mirrors here a long time, during the Renaissance. So we've been buying all these inexpensive antique mirrors. And the idea is we're going to put them all on the walls of this one room. It's a large room. And we bought a crystal chandelier. And
that is crystal, not acrylic.
Yeah. And the whole theme is light. And since these are transparent, well, they're transparent, but they're semi-transparent in that some of them are colored, translucent. Anyway, if you put them in front of the mirror, then the light goes through them, hits the mirror, bounces back through. And the whole room is just going to have these photons just zicking around, lighting everything up. It should be fantastic. They're sort of one-way puzzles. You don't take them apart. You put them together. Once they're together.
Usually they break when you take them back apart.
Yeah.
It's just more of a fun thing for me I've got to constantly be doing something. I can't shut down. And the crystal puzzles is something that I can be doing.
That's just one room. The other room we have that's of interest is the dungeon. And it's a real dungeon. And that's where we put people who've taken a puzzle apart but haven't put it back together yet. And so
they have to stay until they get it done.
Keep we'll bring them food at the end of each day. But they can't leave until they get the puzzle done.
So you got to be good if you show up at the World Puzzle Center.
Yeah, and that's sort of why we don't allow young children.
Yeah.
I mean, they'd go wild, but they'd be breaking everything. And some of the stuff is one of a kind.
So I want to get back to something I think George mentioned, which is having people come to look at the puzzles to do research. Can you talk more about who those people are and what kind of research they might be doing?
Well, okay, first of all, I guess the most prominent group would be other puzzlers that want to write articles about it. George writes a lot of articles for a magazine. It's Cubism for Fun. I've written a couple myself for this, but people that are wanting to do research on puzzles, to develop new puzzles, or an academic wanting to find out where the original was, or maybe looking at the map puzzles that I've got, for example, how were the maps differently and how were they displayed? So it can be just about anyone that wants to do it. We have an artist, I guess you would call her, from Israel coming next year. She's going to stay with us for at least 3 months to do research on puzzle rings, on puzzle jewelry, because I have quite a lot of it. And she wants to do some research to see if there are different patterns, different techniques that she hasn't encountered yet, so that she can develop her art, as it were.
Behind some of the puzzles, in fact, probably most of the puzzles, there's a mathematical concept. And some puzzles are built expressly to bring forth the particular mathematical concept. So group theory is a part of mathematics, and you can have all different types of subgroups and different types of groups. And there's a very interesting one. I got a telephone call from a mathematician at a local university saying that she has a group of mathematicians that are very much interested in seeing this particular puzzle and any other puzzles that express group theory. And so this would be the type of research that would go on. For example, a mathematician exploring various combinatoric techniques, and a historian interested in labyrinths that go all the way back 3,000 years.
Or the evolution of a puzzle over time.
Yeah. And then some people are curious about the materials and 3D printing. And there's also a whole genre of jug puzzles. These are puzzles that you fill with wine or water and then try and drink it without spilling. And it involves a lot of hydraulics and little holes that have to be covered up with your fingers and little pipes that have to be blown. It's a whole world unto its own. And we have a magnificent collection of all these puzzles. So you can describe a puzzle like a jug puzzle, but until you fill it with wine and try and drink out of it, you really can't get the full feel of this particular puzzle because you get all covered with this red liquid.
And of course, if you're not very good at it, you're probably too drunk to remember.
That's right.
That too.
Mm-hmm.
Out of their entire collection, Roxanne's favorite pieces are the especially beautiful ones that were created by a Spanish artist. Small, evocative sculptures that also happen to be puzzles.
Miguel Barracal is from Spain. He had a foundry here in Italy, in Verona. He did most of his artwork here, actually, the puzzles here. We have about 140 of his different pieces. Each one is unique. I started collecting. A friend of mine in Germany had one, and I just fell in love with it, and I bought that one. I wake up every morning, and the first thing I do is I go to the auction houses to look for pieces that I don't have and make sure that I can get in on the bidding. I'm very good friends with the artist's oldest son, De Carlos. If anything comes up that I don't have, he'll send me a message saying, you need to get this one. And he'll give me introductions to the auction houses to make sure that I can get in on the bidding. They're just gorgeous pieces. They're art, they're sculptures, they're very sensual, they feel good in your hands, and they're just nice to look at, and they're a fun puzzle to put together.
Yeah, I sought out a video on YouTube to see what it was, and they're amazing looking. I can see the appeal. So, one last question for you. I read an article in which you said that yours is the largest puzzle collection in the world, and I don't have any reason to doubt that. What are your thoughts about going to the fine folks of the Guinness Book of World Records and making it official, or is that just something that doesn't involve you in the slightest?
No.
We don't need to. People. If we did that, we would have people knocking on the door that we don't want in the house. This is still our home. It's still our home. And, just like you said, you're a layperson, you don't know anything about it. And if people come up and have access to it, we'll have so many broken pieces. That's my first thought. But we don't need the publicity. And you have to go through a lot of hoops. Quite recently, a lot of my friends have been sending me an article about a guy from Germany who has the largest collection of Rubik's Cubes in the world. And I went online and I looked at his collection. He was bragging about it in a forum that I'm a moderator of. And quite a few people said, have you seen Roxanne's collection? And he said, I don't need to. I know mine is the biggest. When I looked at it, I started talking to him. He's a nice kid. He didn't know any better. Let's put it that way. And Guinness contacted him because of the size of his collection. He was in a newspaper and he just went with it. It doesn't appeal.
Yeah. It's also incredibly tedious from what I understand in terms of paperwork. And, they want to make sure that you have the actual record and can back it up with an inventory of some kind. So if you don't need it, you don't need it.
Yeah. No, we don't. But I know from that, just from speaking to that young gentleman in Germany, it turns out he's a really nice guy. Guinness didn't do due diligence. I wrote to Guinness afterwards and I said, did you look for any other collections? I got no responses from them. They ignored me. They were deleting my posts, It's like, okay. Anyway, George might have a different opinion on it.
No, there's no need to brag.
Yeah. It's just, we have what we have. And we know it. And the people that want to see it are going to know where it is and how to get here. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Well, Roxanne and George, puzzles may not all have time limits, but podcasts do, and that's my sort of awkward way of saying we're out of time here. So I want to thank you both for taking the time to talk about your passion for puzzles, and I wish you best of luck with the castle and solving any issues you encounter in getting the World Puzzle Center up to speed. This has been fun.
Well, thank you very much.
And hopefully you'll find yourself on an Italian vacation in Umbria someday and stop by for a couple of days. It's all free.
Yeah. Although I'm afraid I wouldn't get out of the dungeon. I'm not.
I'll give you the easy puzzles.
Okay, David. Good night.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Ciao.
Well, what more is there to say about the puzzle fanatics who've got more puzzles than probably anybody else? Plenty, apparently. Later in 2023, Roxanne and George will be profiled in a feature article in the New York Times. And a documentary filmmaker is currently working on a short film about the couple and their puzzle passion. But the Millers don't seem to want or need the attention. Apparently, they'd just as soon spend time with their fellow puzzle people and enjoy a little bit of puzzle peace. For Keeps is a production of me, David Peterkowski. My thanks to Roxanne and George Miller for talking about their extensive and seemingly all-encompassing puzzle collection, and their new 600-year-old home for all of it in the hills of Umbria, Italy. At forkeepspodcast.com, you'll see photos of the Millers, their castle, and some of the standout pieces from their incredible collection. And you'll find a link to Roxanne's blog, in which you can track how the pieces of their new World Puzzle Center are fitting together. The show's theme song is by Still Flyin, and the closing theme is by Eric Frisch. Additional music for this episode comes courtesy of Blue Dot Sessions. Thanks for listening to For Keeps. Until next time, keep on keeping on.